The bruise on Victoria Reed's jaw throbbed with each labored breath as she stumbled through the dusty streets of Mineral Park, Arizona, trying to keep her head down and her steps steady despite the way her ribs screamed in protest. The September sun beat mercilessly overhead in 1878, casting harsh shadows across the wooden storefronts and saloons that lined the main thoroughfare of this copper mining town, nestled in the Surbat Mountains. She pressed one trembling hand against the rough wooden wall of the general store, fighting the wave of dizziness that threatened to send her crashing to the boardwalk. The marks Silas Drummond had left on her were hidden beneath her high-necked calico dress, but the ones on her face told enough of a story that passers-by either stared or looked away too quickly. And Victoria hated both reactions with equal intensity. She had said no. That simple word had been her crime, her transgression that warranted his fists. Silas Drummond owned half the copper claims in the area and seemed to believe that gave him ownership over everything else too, including the women who worked in his households or caught his fancy. Victoria had been working as a seamstress in town for only 3 months, having come west after her father's death left her with nothing back in St. Louis except debts and bitter memories. She was 22 years old and had thought she could make a new life here, thought she could be independent and safe. But Silas had noticed her, had started appearing at the boarding house where she rented a room, had made it clear what he wanted. When she refused his advances yesterday evening, when she told him firmly that she had no interest in becoming his mistress or anything else to him, his expression had shifted from charm to something dark and terrible. The beating had been methodical, calculated. He knew where to hit to cause maximum pain without breaking bones that would draw the law's attention. Not that Sheriff Morrison would have done anything anyway. Silas Drummond paid the sheriff's salary. Everyone knew that. The copper money ran this town like blood through veins, and Silas was the heart pumping it all. Victoria had dragged herself back to her room afterward, spent the night curled on her narrow bed, and woke knowing she could not stay here. Could not keep working in a town where a man like that had power over her safety and her future. But leaving required money she did not have. The stage to Prescott cost $5, and she had maybe 2 to her name. Her sewing money barely covered her room and board. Victoria blinked back tears of frustration and pain as she forced herself to keep walking toward the boarding house. She needed to lie down, needed to think of some plan that did not involve throwing herself on the mercy of strangers or worse, crawling back to apologize to Silas in hopes he would leave her alone. The very thought made her stomach turn. "Madam, excuse me, madam, are you all right?" The voice was deep and gentle, tinged with concern that sounded genuine enough to make Victoria's defenses rise instinctively. She turned too quickly, gasped at the pain the movement caused, and found herself looking up into the face of a man she had never seen before. He was tall, perhaps 26 or 27 years old, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his dusty Stetson and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. His face was tanned and honest-looking, with the kind of lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, trail-worn denim and a faded shirt, dusty boots with well-used spurs. A gun belt sat on his hips, but his hands were held carefully away from the weapon, palms visible in a gesture of peace. "I'm fine," Victoria said automatically, the lie tasting bitter on her split lip. "Thank you for your concern." The cowboy's expression shifted to something that might have been anger, but not directed at her. His jaw tightened as his gaze took in her bruised face, and when he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "Begging your pardon, madam, but you don't look fine at all. You look like someone hurt you pretty badly. Is there anything I can do to help? Someone I can fetch for you? A doctor, maybe, or family. I have no family here, Victoria said, then wondered why she was telling this stranger anything at all. Perhaps it was the genuine concern in his eyes, or perhaps it was simply that she was so tired of being afraid and alone. And the doctor costs money I don't have. I'll be fine. I just need to rest. The cowboy removed his hat, revealing that dark hair fully, and held it against his chest in a gesture of respect that seemed old-fashioned even for this rough frontier town. My name is Alexander Osborne, madam. I just rode in this morning looking for work on one of the ranches outside town. I don't mean to intrude, but if you need help getting somewhere safe, I'd be honored to assist you. No strings, no expectations, just one human being helping another. Victoria studied him for a long moment, trying to read whether his words were genuine or just another trap. She had learned the hard way that kind words from men could hide cruel intentions. But Alexander Osborne's face held nothing but honest concern, and something in his steady gaze made her want to trust him despite her better judgment. The boarding house is just down the street, she said finally. I can make it there myself, but thank you, Mr. Osborne. Then let me at least walk beside you, he said. These streets don't look particularly safe, and you look like you could use a friend, even a brand new one. Victoria nodded, too exhausted to argue, and they began walking slowly down the dusty street together. Alexander kept pace with her careful steps, not touching her, but staying close enough that his presence felt protective rather than threatening. Other townspeople they passed seemed to take note of him, and Victoria realized that having a man beside her, even a stranger, made people less likely to stare at her injuries with that mixture of pity and judgment she had been receiving all morning. Can I ask what happened? Alexander said quietly as they walked. Or is that too forward of me? Victoria was silent for several steps, debating how much to say, but something about his genuine concern loosened her tongue. A man named Silas Drummond has been pursuing me. He owns copper claims in the area, has money and influence. Last night I told him no, told him I was not interested in his attentions. He did not take my refusal well. The muscle in Alexander's jaw jumped, and his hand briefly moved toward his gun before he forced it back to his side. He did this to you because you said no. He believes his money gives him the right to whatever he wants, Victoria said, hearing the bitterness in her own voice. And in this town, he might be right. The sheriff works for him. Most of the businesses depend on his mining operations. I'm just a seamstress with no family and no protection. My no meant nothing to him. They had reached the boarding house, a 2-story wooden structure that had seen better days but was clean and relatively respectable. Victoria stopped at the bottom of the steps leading to the front porch, turning to face Alexander. Thank you for walking with me, Mr. Osborne. It was kind of you. Alexander met her eyes with an intensity that took her breath away. Your no should have meant everything, Miss Reed. Victoria Reed. Miss Reed, your no should have meant everything because you said it. A man who doesn't respect a woman's refusal isn't a man at all, no matter how much money he has or what kind of power he wields. Alexander's voice was fierce with conviction. And if you'll permit me to say so, you deserve better than what this town has given you. Tears pricked Victoria's eyes and she blinked them back furiously. She had not expected such simple, straightforward support from anyone, let alone a stranger she had met on the street. That's a lovely sentiment, Mr. Osborne, but sentiments don't change reality. Silas Drummond runs this town, and I'm nobody. You're not nobody, Alexander said firmly. You're a person who deserves respect and safety, and I'll be damned if I'll stand by and let some bully of a mine owner think otherwise. He paused, seemed to be wrestling with something, then continued. "Miss Reed, I know we just met, and I know you have no reason to trust me. But I want you to know something. If you need help, if that man comes after you again, you can find me. I'll be in town at least until I find work, staying at the hotel down the street. And I promise you, your no will always be respected with me. Always." Victoria felt something shift in her chest, some small frozen part of her heart beginning to thaw at his words. She had been so alone since coming to Mineral Park, had felt so powerless against Silas's wealth and influence. To have someone, even a stranger, stand beside her and affirm her worth felt like water in the desert. "Why would you do this?" she asked quietly. "You don't know me. You could find yourself in trouble with Silas Drummond, and he's not a man to cross lightly." Alexander replaced his hat on his head and gave her a small, sad smile. "My mother was widowed when I was 15 years old. A man in our town in Texas decided she owed him certain favors in exchange for help with the ranch. When she refused him, he tried to take by force what she wouldn't give freely. I was big enough by then to stop him, but it taught me something I've never forgotten. A woman's no means no, whether she's a widow or a seamstress or a queen. It's that simple. And any man who thinks otherwise needs to be taught better." "What happened to the man?" Victoria asked. "He left town after I broke his arm, and the sheriff made it clear he wasn't welcome anymore," Alexander said. "We had a good sheriff in Sweetwater. Not all towns are so lucky." He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture of farewell. "You take care of yourself, Miss Reed, and remember what I said. You need help, you come find me." Victoria watched him walk away, his tall figure moving down the street with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. She stood there longer than she should have, her ribs aching and her face throbbing, trying to process what had just happened. In the span of 10 minutes, this stranger had shown her more respect and kindness than Silas Drummond had in 3 months of pursuing her. More than most of the town had shown her in the aftermath of her beating. She turned and climbed the stairs to the boarding house, each step an exercise in pain management. Her room was small and sparse, containing only a narrow bed, a washstand with a chipped pitcher and basin, a single chair, and a trunk that held all her worldly possessions. Victoria locked the door behind her and sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of her situation. She could not stay in Mineral Park. That much was clear. Silas Drummond would not simply leave her alone after her refusal. Men like him never did. He would see her continued presence as either an invitation to try again or an insult to his pride that needed to be addressed. Either way, she was in danger. But without money, without means, how could she leave? And where would she go? She had no family, no connections, nothing but her sewing skills and her determination to survive. A knock on her door made her jump, sending fresh pain through her ribs. "Who is it?" She called, hating how frightened she sounded. "It's Mrs. Patterson, dear. I heard you came in." "Are you all right?" Victoria opened the door to find her landlady, a stern-faced woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing, standing in the hallway with a tray. On it was a bowl of soup, a piece of bread, and a small bottle that Victoria recognized as laudanum. "I heard what happened," Mrs. Patterson said without preamble, pushing past Victoria into the room and setting the tray on the washstand. "Silas Drummond is a plague on this town, but he pays his bills and spreads his money around, so most folks turn a blind eye to his behavior. I'm sorry this happened to you, child." "Thank you," Victoria said, surprised by the kindness. Mrs. Patterson was not known for her warmth, though she ran a clean establishment and treated her boarders fairly. "Eat the soup. Use the laudanum if the pain gets too bad," Mrs. Patterson said. "And here." She pulled a small cloth bag from her apron pocket and pressed it into Victoria's hand. It clinked with the weight of coins. "It's not much, but it's enough for a stage ticket and a bit extra. You need to leave Mineral Park, Miss Reed. Tonight if you can manage it, tomorrow at the latest. Silas came by this morning looking for you. I told him you had already left town, but he didn't believe me. He'll be back." Victoria stared at the bag in her hand, overwhelmed. "Mrs. Patterson, I can't take your money. I have no way to pay you back." "Consider it an investment in justice," the older woman said grimly. "I had a daughter once. A man like Silas Drummond took her innocence and then discarded her like trash. She couldn't live with the shame of it, not in a small town where everyone knew. She took her own life when she was 19 years old." Mrs. Patterson's voice was steady, but her eyes held old grief. "I couldn't save her, but maybe I can help you get away before Silas destroys you too. Take the money, child. Get on the stage tomorrow and go somewhere he can't follow." Victoria's throat tightened with emotion. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll be smart and leave," Mrs. Patterson replied. "Say you'll make a good life somewhere else and never look back at this cursed town." She moved toward the door, then paused. "There's a stage leaving at dawn tomorrow for Prescott. Be on it." After Mrs. Patterson left, Victoria sat on her bed and counted the coins in the bag. $8. More than enough for the stage and a few nights in a cheap boarding house while she looked for work in Prescott. It was a gift beyond price, a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. She ate the soup mechanically, her mind already planning her departure. She would pack tonight, leave before the sun rose, and be gone before anyone noticed. Silas Drummond would rage, but he could not follow her all the way to Prescott over a seamstress who had refused him. At least, she hoped he would not. The afternoon passed slowly. Victoria dozed fitfully, woke to pain, took a small dose of the laudanum Mrs. Patterson had left, and dozed again. The sun was setting when another knock on her door jerked her awake. Terror flooded through her. What if it was Silas? What if he had come back? "Miss Reed, it's Alexander Osborne. I brought some things I thought you might need." Victoria's heart was still racing as she opened the door cautiously. Alexander stood in the hallway holding a basket covered with a cloth. He looked concerned and somewhat apologetic. "I'm sorry to disturb you," he said. "But I got to thinking after we talked, and I went to the general store and picked up a few supplies. Some salve for bruises, some willow bark tea for pain, some food that keeps well. I thought you might need them." He held out the basket. "I can just leave it here and go if you'd prefer." Victoria took the basket, touched by his thoughtfulness. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Osborne. Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "Would you like to come in for a moment? I promise it's entirely proper. Mrs. Patterson's rooms are right downstairs, and the door will stay open." Alexander looked surprised but pleased. "If you're sure, madam. I don't want to impose." Victoria stepped back and led him into her small room, leaving the door wide open as promised. Alexander removed his hat and stood awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with the intimacy of being in her private space but trying not to show it. Victoria set the basket on the washstand and gestured to the single chair. "Please, sit down." "I'd rather stand, madam. You should sit." "You're the one who's hurt." Victoria sat on the edge of her bed, suddenly exhausted again. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said, not entirely sure why she was telling him. "On the dawn stage to Prescott. Mrs. Patterson gave me money for the ticket. She warned me that Silas Drummond came looking for me today, and she thinks it's not safe for me to stay in Mineral Park." Alexander's expression darkened. "She's probably right about that. A man who would beat a woman for refusing him isn't going to let it go easily." He paused, seemed to wrestle with something, then said, "Miss Reed, would you consider letting me escort you to Prescott? I was planning to look for ranch work around here, but there's ranches near Prescott too." and the roads between here and there can be dangerous for a woman traveling alone. There's still Apache trouble in some areas, and road agents who prey on stage passengers. I can't ask you to do that, Victoria said, even as part of her desperately wanted to say yes, wanted the protection and security his presence would offer. You came here looking for work. You have your own life to live. You're not asking, I'm offering, Alexander said. And truth be told, I don't much like this town anyway. Any place where a man like Silas Drummond can terrorize women without consequence isn't somewhere I want to put down roots. He met her eyes steadily. Let me help you, Miss Reed. Not because you're weak or because I think you need rescuing, but because it's the right thing to do and because I'd like to see you safe. Victoria felt tears threatening again. She was not accustomed to kindness without strings attached, not accustomed to men who offered help without expecting something in return. Why are you being so kind to me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because you deserve kindness, Alexander said simply. And because I was raised to believe that how a man treats women is the measure of his character. I couldn't live with myself if I let you face danger alone when I could help. He moved toward the door, clearly sensing she needed space. Think about it tonight. The stage leaves at dawn. If you decide you want company on the journey, I'll meet you at the stage office at 5:30 tomorrow morning. If you'd rather go alone, I'll respect that too. Your choice, Miss Reed. Always your choice. After he left, Victoria lay back on her bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind whirling. Everything had changed so quickly. Yesterday, she had been just another working woman in a mining town, trying to make an honest living. Today, she was fleeing for her safety with the help of strangers, and a cowboy she had met only hours ago was offering to upend his own plans to protect her. It felt surreal, like something from one of the dime novels she sometimes read when she had spare coins for such luxuries. But this was no novel. This was her life, and the danger was real. Silas Drummond was real, and his fury would be real when he discovered she had left town. Victoria knew she was making the right choice in leaving, but the uncertainty of what came next terrified her. Prescott was a bigger town, with more opportunities but also more dangers. She would be starting over again with nothing but her sewing skills and the few possessions she could carry. Unless she accepted Alexander Osborne's offer. Unless she trusted this stranger who had shown her more kindness in a few hours than most people had shown her in months. Victoria closed her eyes and made her decision. She would meet him at the stage office at dawn. She would accept his help, his protection, his company on the journey, and if that made her weak or foolish, so be it. She was tired of being strong and alone. She rose and began packing her trunk, moving slowly to spare her injured ribs. She did not own much, so the task did not take long. 2 dresses besides the one she wore, undergarments, her sewing supplies, a few books, her mother's silver hairbrush, and the locket containing a photograph of her parents. Everything she owned in the world fit into one small trunk. The thought was depressing, but also strangely freeing. She had nothing to tie her to Mineral Park, nothing to mourn leaving behind except the hope she had carried when she first arrived. That hope was dead now, killed by Silas Drummond's fists, but perhaps she could find new hope in Prescott. Perhaps she could start again. Victoria ate the food Alexander had brought, applied the salve to her bruises, and drank the willow bark tea. The remedies helped ease her pain enough that she could sleep for a few hours. She woke in the darkness before dawn, her body stiff and aching but her mind clear. Today she would leave Mineral Park behind. Today she would begin again. She dressed carefully in her best dress, a dark blue calico that was respectable and practical for travel. She pinned up her blonde hair, wincing when her fingers brushed the bruise on her jaw. She looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand and barely recognized the woman staring back. Bruised, frightened, but determined. She would survive this. She had survived worse. Victoria carried her trunk downstairs as quietly as possible, not wanting to wake the other boarders. Mrs. Patterson was waiting in the kitchen, already dressed and brewing coffee. The older woman handed Victoria a cup and a wrapped package of food for the journey without saying anything. The silence between them was comfortable, understanding. "Thank you," Victoria said finally, "for everything. I won't forget your kindness." "Just live well," Mrs. Patterson said. "That's thanks enough. And Miss Reed, that cowboy who came by yesterday, the one who brought you supplies, he seems like a good man. Don't be too proud to accept help when it's offered freely." Victoria managed a small smile. "I'm meeting him at the stage office." "Good girl," Mrs. Patterson said with approval. "Now go, before the town starts waking up." The streets of Mineral Park were dark and empty as Victoria made her way to the stage office, dragging her trunk behind her. The pre-dawn air was cool, a relief after the previous day's heat. Overhead, the stars were beginning to fade as the sky lightened in the east. Somewhere a rooster crowed, and Victoria heard the distant sound of the stamp mills at the copper mines beginning their endless work. In a few hours, this town would be fully awake and going about its business, but by then she would be gone. Alexander Osborne was waiting outside the stage office when she arrived, standing beside a horse laden with saddlebags and a bedroll. He wore clean clothes and had clearly made an effort to look presentable, his face freshly shaved and his hair combed back under his hat. When he saw Victoria, he smiled and immediately moved forward to take her trunk. "Good morning, Miss Reed," he said. "I'm glad you decided to accept my offer." "Good morning, Mr. Osborne," Victoria replied. "I'm grateful for your company on the journey." "Call me Alexander, please," he said as he hefted her trunk. "We're going to be traveling companions. No need for such formality." "Then you should call me Victoria," she said, surprised by how easily the offer came. She was not usually so informal with men, but Alexander felt different somehow. Safe. The stage office manager, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, emerged from the building and looked them over. "You two the passengers for Prescott?" "Yes, sir," Alexander said. "2 tickets, please. And I'll need to arrange for my horse to be stabled here until I can send for him or sell him if that's easier." "I'll give you $40 for the horse," the manager said, eyeing the animal. "He's sound enough and I can use him for the stage line." Alexander hesitated, clearly attached to the animal, then nodded. $40 is fair." He handed over the horse's reins and accepted the money, then purchased their stage tickets. The whole transaction took only a few minutes, and then they were loading Victoria's trunk onto the stage and climbing aboard. They were the only passengers for the first leg of the journey. Victoria settled onto the hard bench seat, trying to find a position that did not aggravate her bruised ribs. Alexander sat across from her, his long legs taking up most of the available space, but he seemed conscious of giving her room and not crowding her. The driver cracked his whip, the horses lurched forward, and Mineral Park began to fall behind them as the stage rolled north toward Prescott. Victoria watched through the window as the town disappeared in the dusty dawn light. She felt a mixture of relief and regret. Relief that she was leaving Silas Drummond behind, regret that her attempt to build a new life had failed so badly. But perhaps this was not failure, merely a detour on a longer journey. Perhaps Prescott would offer opportunities Mineral Park never could. "Are you all right?" Alexander asked quietly, and Victoria realized she had been silent for several minutes. "Yes," she said, "just thinking. It's strange to leave everything behind and start over in a place where no one knows you." I've done it a few times myself, Alexander said. My family's ranch in Texas failed after a drought killed most of our cattle. My mother passed a year after that, just worn down by grief and hardship. I've been working ranch jobs across Texas, New Mexico, and now Arizona for the past 5 years, moving wherever the work is. It gets lonely sometimes, but there's also freedom in it. No ties, no expectations. You can be whoever you want to be. Is that what you want? Victoria asked. To keep moving. Or do you hope to settle down somewhere eventually? Alexander was quiet for a moment, gazing out the window at the rugged landscape rolling past. The Surbat Mountains rose around them, stark and beautiful in the growing light. I'd like to settle eventually, he said. Find a piece of land, build something that lasts. But that takes money, and cowboy wages don't stretch far. I've been saving what I can, but it's slow going. He turned back to her with a slight smile. What about you? What do you want, Victoria? No one had asked her that in a long time. Victoria considered the question carefully. I want to feel safe, she said finally. I want to do work I'm good at and be paid fairly for it. I want a home that's mine, where no one can hurt me or drive me away. Maybe that's not ambitious enough, but it's the truth. That's not unambitious at all, Alexander said firmly. Safety and security are things everyone deserves, and there's no shame in wanting them. You're a seamstress, you said. That's skilled work. Prescott's a good-sized town. There should be opportunities for someone with your talents. They talked through the morning as the stage rolled northward, the conversation flowing easily despite their brief acquaintance. Alexander told her about growing up on his family's ranch, about learning to rope and ride before he could raid, about the hard years after his father's death when he and his mother struggled to keep the ranch going. Victoria told him about her life in St. Louis, about her father who had been a bookkeeper until drink and gambling debts destroyed him, about her decision to come west after his death left her with nothing but bills to pay and creditors demanding money she did not have. So we're both running from failed dreams, Alexander said, but there was no judgment in his voice, only understanding. I prefer to think we're running toward new possibilities, Victoria replied, and Alexander laughed, a warm sound that made something flutter in her chest. The stage made several stops throughout the day to change horses and let passengers stretch their legs. At one station, they shared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, sitting outside on a rough wooden bench while the horses were tended. Victoria was acutely aware of how her bruised face drew stares from the station keeper and the stage driver, but Alexander's presence beside her seemed to discourage questions. He was protective without being overbearing, attentive without being intrusive, and Victoria found herself relaxing in his company more than she had relaxed in months. As afternoon faded toward evening, 2 more passengers joined them at a station, a married couple heading to Prescott to visit family. They were friendly enough, though the wife's eyes widened when she saw Victoria's bruises. Victoria saw the woman lean toward her husband and whisper something, saw the man's expression harden. She braced herself for questions or judgment, but Alexander smoothly engaged the couple in conversation about conditions in Prescott, drawing their attention away from Victoria and giving her space to simply rest. She dozed off as darkness fell, exhausted by the long day and the lingering pain of her injuries. She woke sometime later to find her head resting against Alexander's shoulder, his arm carefully positioned to keep her from jolting against the side of the stage as it bounced over rough roads. She started to pull away, embarrassed, but Alexander spoke softly. "You're fine. Rest if you need to. It's still a few hours to Prescott." Victoria knew she should move, should maintain proper distance between them, but she was so tired and his presence felt so safe that she let herself drift back to sleep. When she woke again, the stage was pulling into Prescott, and Alexander was gently shaking her shoulder. "We're here, Victoria. Time to wake up." Prescott in 1878 was a bustling territorial capital, larger and more established than Mineral Park, with actual streets instead of just dusty roads, gas streetlights, multiple hotels and boarding houses, shops and businesses of every description. The stage stopped in front of the depot on Montezuma Street, and passengers disembarked into the cool night air. Victoria stood on the boardwalk, clutching her shawl around her shoulders, and felt overwhelmed by the noise and activity even at this late hour. "There's a respectable boarding house just up the street," Alexander said, retrieving her trunk from the stage. "Mrs. Chen's place. I stayed there last time I was in Prescott. She's fair and honest, and she doesn't tolerate trouble from her boarders. Shall we see if she has rooms available?" Victoria nodded, grateful that he seemed to know where they were going. They walked up Montezuma Street, Alexander carrying her trunk as though it weighed nothing. The boarding house was a neat two-story building painted white with green shutters. A sign in the window read "Rooms available. Inquire within." Mrs. Chen turned out to be a small, sharp-eyed Chinese woman in her 40s who looked them over carefully when they knocked on her door. Her gaze lingered on Victoria's bruised face, then moved to Alexander, assessing. "You want rooms?" she asked in accented but clear English. "Yes, madam," Alexander said politely. "2 rooms if you have them. This is Miss Reid and I'm Alexander Osborne. We just arrived on the stage from Mineral Park." Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. "Mineral Park is rough town." "You running from trouble?" "She is," Alexander said bluntly. Man there thought her refusal was negotiable. "We both decided Prescott offered better prospects." Mrs. Chen nodded as though this confirmed something she had suspected. "I have 2 rooms, top floor. $1 per week per room, meals extra. No drinking, no fighting, no visitors in rooms after 8 in the evening. You follow rules, we have no problems. You break rules, you leave immediately." "Understood." "Understood, madam," Victoria said. "And thank you, Mrs." Chen led them upstairs and showed them to 2 small but clean rooms at the end of the hallway. Each contained a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a chair, with a window overlooking the street. Simple but comfortable, and far nicer than Victoria's room in Mineral Park had been. Mrs. Chen accepted payment for the first week from both of them, provided clean linens, and left them alone. Victoria stood in her new room, suddenly uncertain. The long day of travel, the uncertainty of her situation, the kindness of this near stranger who had upended his own plans to help her, all of it felt surreal and overwhelming. She heard a soft knock on her door and found Alexander standing in the hallway. "I just wanted to make sure you're settled," he said, "and to say good night. Tomorrow we can both start looking for work. But tonight, rest. You're safe here, Victoria. No one from Mineral Park knows where you are, and this is a big enough town that you can disappear into it if you need to." "Thank you, Alexander," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything. I don't know how I can ever repay you." "You don't need to repay kindness," Alexander said gently. "That's not how it works. Just get yourself established here, build the life you deserve, and be happy. That's thanks enough." He touched the brim of his hat in that courteous gesture she was coming to recognize as characteristic of him. "Good night, Victoria. Sleep well." Victoria closed her door and leaned against it, her heart full of complicated feelings she could not quite name. She barely knew Alexander Osborne, yet he had shown her more consideration and respect than men she had known for months. He had asked nothing of her, expected nothing, simply helped because it was right. The contrast with Silas Drummond could not have been starker. She undressed slowly, her body aching with fatigue and healing injuries, and crawled into the narrow bed. The sheets were clean and smelled of soap and sunshine. Through the window, she could hear the sounds of Prescott settling in for the night, horses and wagons on the streets, voices calling good night, a piano playing somewhere in the distance. It was so different from the harsh, dusty isolation of Mineral Park. Here, Victoria thought, she might really be able to start over. Here, she might find the safety and peace she craved. Sleep claimed her quickly, and for the first time in weeks, her dreams were not haunted by Silas Drummond's cold eyes and cruel hands. Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of bacon and coffee drifting up from downstairs. For a moment she was disoriented, not remembering where she was. Then memory returned and she sat up carefully. Her ribs were still tender, her face still bruised, but the pain was less than it had been. The laudanum and willow bark had helped, as had simply getting away from the source of her fear. She dressed in her other good dress, a gray calico with small white flowers, and pinned up her hair as neatly as possible. When she went downstairs, she found a dining room where several boarders were eating breakfast. Alexander was already there, sitting at a long table with a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits in front of him. He stood when he saw her, a gesture of courtesy that seemed as natural to him as breathing. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in weeks," Victoria admitted, taking the seat he pulled out for her. Mrs. Chen appeared from the kitchen and set a plate of food in front of Victoria without being asked. "You eat," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "You too thin. Man who hurt you, he steal more than just your pride. He steal your appetite, your peace. You eat, you get strong again." Victoria was touched by the older woman's perceptiveness and concern. She ate slowly, savoring food that was simple but well prepared. Alexander kept up light conversation, telling her about the other boarders he had met at breakfast and what he had learned about work prospects in the area. "There's several ranches within riding distance that hire cowboys seasonally," he said. "I'm going to check at the livery stable after breakfast, see if they know of any openings. What about you? Do you have a plan for finding sewing work?" "I thought I would visit the dress shops and milliners, see if any of them need help," Victoria said. Mrs. Patterson back in Mineral Park said Prescott is big enough to support several seamstresses. "That sounds like a good plan," Alexander said. "How about we meet back here for supper tonight and compare notes?" Victoria agreed, warmed by the casual assumption that they would continue to spend time together. After breakfast, they went their separate ways. Victoria spent the morning walking up and down Prescott's main streets, visiting every shop that might employ a seamstress. The responses were discouraging. Most shops already had all the help they needed, and those that did not took one look at Victoria's bruised face and made excuses about why they could not hire her. By noon, Victoria was exhausted and discouraged, her feet aching and her spirits sinking. She stopped to rest on a bench in the plaza, watching people go about their business. Prescott was clearly a prosperous town, with well-dressed women and successful-looking businessmen, nice shops and sturdy buildings. But prosperity did not necessarily translate to opportunity, at least not for someone like her. The bruises on her face marked her as damaged goods in the eyes of shop owners who wanted to present a certain image to their customers. "Miss Reed, Victoria." She looked up to find Alexander approaching, leading a horse. He looked pleased about something, but his expression shifted to concern when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting down beside her on the bench. "Bad morning." "No one wants to hire a seamstress with a bruised face," Victoria said, trying to keep the bitterness out of her voice and failing. "They look at me and see trouble, or they see a woman with poor judgment who associates with violent men. Either way, they don't want me in their shops." She pressed her hands to her face, careful of the bruising. "I don't know what I'm going to do, Alexander. I have enough money for maybe 2 more weeks at the boarding house and then—" "Hey," Alexander said softly, "don't give up yet. You've only been looking for one morning. And besides, I have good news that might help." He waited until she looked at him. "I found work at a ranch about 10 miles outside town. The owner, a man named James Crawford, needs cowboys for the autumn roundup and to help move his herd to winter pasture. The pay is $30 a month plus room and board, and he said I could start right away." "That's wonderful," Victoria said, genuinely happy for him even through her own disappointment. "I'm glad at least one of us had success." "That's not the good news, or not all of it anyway," Alexander said. "When I mentioned that I had escorted a lady seamstress to Prescott, Mr. Crawford said his wife was just complaining that she couldn't find anyone to help with mending and sewing for the ranch hands. Apparently the last woman they hired to do it moved away, and Mrs. Crawford has been trying to keep up with it herself while also managing the household and raising 3 children. He said if you were interested, he would talk to his wife about hiring you." Victoria felt hope flickering to life in her chest. "Room and board included." That's what he said. "There's a small cabin on the property that the previous seamstress used. It's yours if you want it, along with wages. He mentioned $20 a month to start, more if the work goes well." Alexander smiled at her. "It's not a fancy dress shop in town, but it's honest work and it would give you a safe place to stay while your face heals and you figure out your next steps." "When can I meet him?" Victoria asked. "I told him I would bring you out this afternoon if you were interested," Alexander said. "I bought this horse off a man at the livery stable who was heading back east and needed to sell quickly. Got a decent price. We could ride out now if you want. It's a nice property, or what I saw of it seemed nice anyway." Victoria did not hesitate. "Let's go." They stopped at the boarding house so Victoria could change into her older, more practical dress and collect a shawl. "Mrs. Chen raised her eyebrows when they explained where they were going but seemed approving. "Ranch work is good work," she said. "Honest people, honest pay. Better than many things in town. You go, you see. If it is good, you take it." The ride out to the Crawford Ranch took about an hour, with Victoria riding behind Alexander on his new horse. She had not ridden in years and felt awkward and nervous at first, but Alexander was a patient teacher, showing her how to hold on safely and move with the horse's gait. The country outside Prescott was beautiful in the autumn light, with golden grass and scattered juniper trees, mountains rising in the distance against a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. The Crawford Ranch was a sprawling operation with a main house, several barns and outbuildings, corrals full of horses and cattle, and a few small cabins scattered around the property. James Crawford turned out to be a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. His wife Martha was a capable-looking woman with graying hair and a warm smile that made Victoria feel welcome immediately. "Come in," Martha said when Alexander introduced them. "Alexander told us a bit about your situation, Miss Reed. I'm sorry you had such trouble in Mineral Park. That's a rough town, always has been. But you're safe here, and if you're willing to work, we could certainly use your skills." Martha led Victoria through the ranch house, showing her the piles of mending that needed doing, the worn clothes that needed patching, the new fabric that needed to be sewn into shirts and trousers for the ranch hands. The amount of work was daunting but not overwhelming, and Victoria felt her confidence returning as she examined the tasks. This was work she knew how to do, work she was good at. "The cabin is just over here," Martha said, leading Victoria outside to a small building set apart from the main house. It was simple but sturdy, with a main room containing a stove, a table and 2 chairs, and a smaller bedroom with a bed and dresser. A sewing machine sat in the corner of the main room, covered with a dusty cloth. The last woman who lived here left this when she moved. Said it was too heavy to take with her. If you take the job, it's yours to use. Victoria walked through the cabin, her mind already rearranging the space and imagining herself living here. It was small, but it was private and safe. She would have her own space, her own door to lock, her own stove to cook on. After months of living in a boarding house room barely big enough to turn around in, this felt like luxury. "What do you think?" Martha asked gently. "It's not fancy, but it's clean and solid, and you'd be safe here. James and I don't tolerate any nonsense from our hands. They treat everyone with respect or they find work elsewhere." "When can I start?" Victoria asked, and Martha's face broke into a wide smile. "Tomorrow, if you like. James can send one of the men to Prescott with a wagon to collect your things from the boarding house. You'll take your meals with us in the main house until you're settled, and then you can use the cabin kitchen if you prefer privacy. We'll provide fabric and thread and any other supplies you need." "Does that sound fair?" "More than fair," Victoria said, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden turn in her fortunes. "Thank you, Mrs. Crawford. You don't know how much this means to me." "I think I do," Martha said quietly. "I was young once, and I know how hard the world can be for women on their own. We take care of our people here, Miss Reed. You work hard for us, and we'll see you're treated right." The ride back to Prescott felt different than the ride out. Victoria clung to Alexander's waist as the horse carried them through the golden afternoon light, and she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. Real, solid hope that her life might actually improve, that she might find the safety and security she craved. "Thank you," she said to Alexander as they rode, "for everything. For helping me leave Mineral Park, for finding this opportunity, for being kind to a stranger who had no claim on your time or attention." "You don't need to keep thanking me," Alexander called back over his shoulder. "I'm glad I could help. And besides, it worked out well for both of us. We both have jobs now and we'll be working at the same place. That's good fortune for me too. I like knowing you'll be safe and settled." Victoria rested her cheek against his back, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing and the warmth of him through his shirt. She was developing feelings for this man, she realized. It was too soon, too fast, too complicated given everything she had just been through. But she could not help the way her heart lifted when she saw him, or the way she felt safe in his presence, or the way his smile made something flutter in her chest. She had never felt this way about anyone before, certainly not about any of the men who had courted her back in St. Louis, and definitely not about Silas Drummond with his cruel hands and crueler words. This was different. Alexander treated her with respect and kindness, asked nothing of her, expected nothing, simply offered his help freely and genuinely. He had promised her that her no would always be respected, and he had kept that promise in every interaction. Victoria was starting to believe that perhaps not all men were like Silas. Perhaps some men, like Alexander, actually meant it when they spoke of honor and respect. They returned to Mrs. Chen's boarding house as the sun was setting. Over supper, they explained the situation to the landlady, who was gracious about releasing them from their weekly commitment despite having just paid for rooms the night before. "I keep the money," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "You paid for week and I turned away other boarders, but I am happy for you both. Ranch work is good. You will do well there." She looked at Victoria with sharp, knowing eyes. "You be careful of your heart, Miss Reed. It is tender now, easy to bruise again. Make sure you heal before you give it away." Victoria felt her cheeks warm, wondering if her feelings for Alexander were so obvious, but she nodded respectfully. "I'll be careful." "And you," Mrs. Chen said, turning to Alexander. "You are good man, I think." "But good man can still cause pain if he is not thoughtful. Her heart has been hurt. Do not hurt it more." "No, madam," Alexander said seriously. "I wouldn't dream of it." They spent one more night at the boarding house, and in the morning, James Crawford himself arrived with a wagon to transport Victoria's trunk and Alexander's few possessions to the ranch. The trip was pleasant, with James telling them about the history of the ranch and the work that would be expected of them. Victoria found herself relaxing more with each mile they traveled away from Prescott, away from the possibility of Silas Drummond somehow finding her. Life at the Crawford Ranch fell into a comfortable routine over the following weeks. Victoria settled into her cabin and began working through the mountains of mending that Martha brought her. The work was steady and satisfying, and Victoria found peace in the rhythm of needle and thread, in the transformation of worn and damaged cloth into something whole and useful again. It felt metaphorical somehow, as though she was mending herself along with the clothes. Alexander worked with the other ranch hands, rising before dawn to tend cattle and horses, mend fences and work the land. Victoria would see him at mealtimes in the Crawford house, where all the hands ate together at a long table. He always sat near her if there was space, always asked about her day, always made her laugh with stories about the ranch or the horses or the other cowboys. The other men treated Victoria with respect, tipping their hats when they passed her, thanking her politely when she mended their clothes, never overstepping or making her uncomfortable. The bruises on Victoria's face faded week by week, replaced by the healthy glow of someone well-fed and well-rested. Her ribs healed, the pain gradually diminishing until she could move freely without discomfort. Martha Crawford took her under her wing, teaching her about ranch life and inviting her to join the family for Sunday suppers. Victoria grew close to the Crawford children, who were fascinated by the sewing machine and loved to watch her work. But it was her growing friendship with Alexander that occupied most of Victoria's thoughts. They fell into the habit of taking evening walks together after supper, wandering the ranch property and talking about everything and nothing. Alexander told her about his dreams of someday owning his own land, about the kind of ranch he wanted to build. Victoria shared her memories of her mother, who had died when she was young, and her complicated feelings about her father, who had loved her but never managed to provide the stability she needed. "You think we ever really escape our pasts?" Victoria asked one evening as they walked along a fence line, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. "Or do we just carry them with us wherever we go?" Alexander was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "I think we carry parts of our past with us," he said finally. "The lessons we learned, the scars we earned, the people who shaped us. But I don't think we're prisoners of our past. We get to choose what we do with it, how we let it influence who we become." He glanced at her. "You're not defined by what Silas Drummond did to you, Victoria. That was something that happened to you, not something that defines who you are." "Sometimes it feels like it defines me," Victoria admitted. "Sometimes I wake up, and for a moment I forget where I am, and I'm back in that room in Mineral Park feeling his fists. And then I remember I'm safe now and I'm here, and he can't touch me. But the fear doesn't always go away just because the danger has passed." Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her fully. In the fading light, his face was serious and gentle. "That fear is natural, Victoria. You went through something terrible. It's going to take time to heal from that, maybe a long time. But you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You left everything behind to escape danger. You started over in a strange town with nothing but your skills and your courage. That takes a special kind of strength. I don't feel strong, Victoria said. I feel scared and small and like I'm constantly waiting for something bad to happen. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Alexander said. It's doing what needs to be done even when you're afraid. You've shown more courage in the past few weeks than most people show in a lifetime. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his intention, and gently took her hand. His palm was calloused from ranch work, warm and solid against her smaller hand. And for what it's worth, you're not alone anymore. You have friends here. The Crawfords care about you. Mrs. Chen cared about you, and I. He paused, seemed to wrestle with something. I care about you too, Victoria, more than I probably should after such a short acquaintance. Victoria's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Alexander could hear it. His hand around hers felt right, felt safe, felt like everything she had been afraid to want. I care about you too, she whispered. But I'm scared, Alexander. I'm scared of trusting someone again. I'm scared of what it means to have feelings for you when we've only known each other for a few weeks. I'm scared that I'm just looking for someone to save me when what I need is to save myself. You're not looking to be saved, Alexander said firmly. You already saved yourself when you left Mineral Park. I just happened to be there to walk beside you. He squeezed her hand gently. And I'm not asking for anything from you, Victoria. I'm not asking for promises or commitments or anything except the chance to keep being your friend. To keep walking with you. If that's all we ever are, friends and nothing more, that's enough. I just want you to know that you're important to me. Tears pricked Victoria's eyes. No man had ever spoken to her this way before, with such honesty and respect for her feelings and her autonomy. Silas Drummond had demanded and taken. The men in St. Louis had courted with pretty words that hid expectations and calculations. But Alexander simply offered, asked nothing, and meant every word he said. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Anything. That promise you made that day we met, that my no would always be respected, did you mean it? Every word, Alexander said without hesitation. Your no always means no, Victoria, in everything, always. And if you ever feel pressured by me or uncomfortable with anything I say or do, you tell me and I'll stop immediately. That's a promise I'll keep as long as I live. Victoria stepped closer to him, still holding his hand, and looked up into his face. In the twilight, his eyes were dark and warm and completely focused on her. What if I said yes instead of no? She asked quietly. What if I said I wanted to be more than friends? What would you say to that? Alexander's breath caught. I would say that you should take all the time you need to be sure, that there's no rush, no pressure, no expectations, that I'll wait however long it takes for you to heal and be ready, and if that's months or years, it doesn't matter. I'll still be here. What if I said I was ready now? Victoria whispered. What if I said I wanted to try, even though I'm scared, even though it's too soon, even though I don't know what I'm doing? Alexander raised his free hand very slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and gently cupped her cheek. His thumb brushed carefully across her skin, avoiding the fading bruise along her jaw. Then, I would say that I'm the luckiest man in Arizona, he said softly. And I would ask permission to kiss you, because I've been wanting to since the first day I met you and saw how brave you were despite being hurt and afraid. Yes, Victoria breathed. Yes, you have permission. Alexander leaned down slowly, carefully, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. When his lips finally met hers, the kiss was gentle and sweet, and nothing like Victoria had expected. There was no demand in it, no aggression, just warmth and tenderness, and the sense of two people connecting in a moment of perfect understanding. Victoria's free hand came up to rest against Alexander's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart under her palm. The kiss lasted only a moment before Alexander pulled back, his eyes searching her face. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Was that okay?" Victoria smiled, a real smile, the first she had felt since before Silas Drummond's attack. "It was more than okay," she said. "It was perfect." They stood there in the twilight, hands joined, and Victoria felt something settle in her chest. She was still scared, still healing, still learning to trust again. But Alexander was patient and kind, and everything she had never dared to hope for. Whatever came next, she was not facing it alone anymore. The autumn weeks passed in a golden haze of work and growing affection. Victoria and Alexander spent every free moment together, talking and walking and slowly learning each other's hearts. Alexander never pushed for more than Victoria was ready to give, content to hold her hand and steal occasional kisses and simply be near her. He told her about his childhood, about his parents and their love story, about his dreams for the future. Victoria opened up about her own past, about the pain of losing her mother young and watching her father deteriorate, about her fear that she was somehow cursed to always be alone and unsafe. "You're not cursed," Alexander told her one Sunday afternoon as they sat by the creek that ran through the ranch property. "You just had some bad luck and met some bad people. But that's over now. You're here, you're safe, and you're building a new life, and I'm honored to be part of it." Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder, content and peaceful in a way she had never been before. "I never thought I could feel this way about someone," she admitted. "After what happened with Silas, I thought I would never be able to trust a man again. But you're different, Alexander. You've shown me that not all men are like him." "Most men aren't like him," Alexander said firmly. "Silas Drummond is a bully and a coward who uses money and power to intimidate people weaker than himself. Real men, good men, they protect and provide and respect. They don't demand or hurt or force." He turned to look at her. "I want you to know something, Victoria. I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since the day I first saw you trying so hard to be brave despite your pain. But I need you to know that my love comes with no strings attached. I love you, but I don't expect you to love me back, not until you're ready, maybe not ever. Your feelings are your own, and I respect that absolutely." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears this time. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. "It scares me how much I feel for you, how much I've come to depend on your presence in my life. But it's also the most wonderful feeling I've ever experienced." Alexander pulled her closer, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "Then let's be scared together," he said. "Let's figure this out as we go, at whatever pace feels right to you. There's no deadline, no timeline. We have all the time in the world." As winter approached, the ranch work intensified. The cattle needed to be moved to lower pastures. Fences needed to be reinforced against the coming weather. Supplies needed to be stocked. Victoria sewed winter clothes for the ranch hands, thick shirts and lined vests to keep them warm during the cold months. Martha Crawford taught her to bake bread and cook hearty stews, skills that Victoria had never learned in her city upbringing. The cabin became truly her home, filled with small comforts she had acquired or made herself. Alexander was increasingly busy with ranch work, sometimes gone for days at a time driving cattle or checking fence lines in distant sections of the property. Victoria missed him terribly when he was away, but his absences also gave her time to think about what she wanted for her future. She realized that she did not want to be a seamstress at her remote ranch forever. She wanted more, wanted to build something of her own. She started saving money from her wages, planning for the day when she might be able to open her own dress shop in Prescott or another town. When she mentioned this to Alexander during one of their walks, he was immediately supportive. "You should do it," he said enthusiastically. "You're talented, Victoria. I've seen the work you do. Women would pay good money for dresses and alterations made by someone with your skill. And if you wanted a business partner, someone to help with the financial side while you focus on the creative work." He trailed off, looking suddenly uncertain. "Never mind, that's getting ahead of myself." "What were you going to say?" Victoria asked. Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her. "I was going to say that I've been saving money too, for land for a future, but if you wanted to open a dress shop, I would invest my savings in that instead. We could be partners, build something together." He hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Victoria Reed, I know it's only been a few months since we met. I know you're still healing from what happened in Mineral Park, but I need to tell you that I want a future with you. Not just friendship, not just courtship, but a real future. Marriage if you would have me. A life built together." Victoria's breath caught. She had known this was coming, had felt the relationship moving in this direction, but hearing the words still made her heart race. "Alexander, You don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "I know it's too soon. I just needed you to know what I'm thinking, what I want. Take all the time you need to decide. But know that I love you, Victoria. I love your strength and your courage and your kind heart. I love the way you hum while you sew and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love everything about you, and I want to spend my life making you happy and keeping you safe." Victoria reached up and cupped his face in both hands. "Alexander Osborne, you are the best man I have ever known. You've shown me what respect and kindness look like, what real love feels like. And I do love you with my whole heart. But you're right that it's too soon. I need more time to be sure, to heal completely, to be confident that I'm choosing you for the right reasons, and not just because you saved me from a terrible situation." "That's fair," Alexander said, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Like I said, take all the time you need." "But," Victoria continued, "ask me again in the spring. Ask me when the weather turns warm and the world feels new again, and I promise I'll have an answer for you then." Alexander's face broke into a wide smile. "Spring it is," he said, and kissed her with a passion that made Victoria's knees weak. The winter months were hard but beautiful. Snow fell on the ranch, transforming the landscape into something magical. Victoria learned to appreciate the silence of a snow-covered world, the crackle of fire in her cabin stove, the taste of hot coffee on a cold morning. She and Alexander spent evenings in the Crawford Main house with the family, playing cards and reading books and simply enjoying each other's company. The closeness of winter quarters strengthened their bond, and Victoria found herself increasingly certain that when spring came, her answer would be yes. Christmas arrived, and the ranch celebrated with a big dinner and exchange of small gifts. Alexander gave Victoria a beautiful shawl he had ordered from a catalog, deep blue wool embroidered with small flowers. Victoria gave him a shirt she had sewn herself, perfectly fitted to his frame and embroidered with his initials on the cuff. They exchanged the gifts privately in her cabin, and the looks that passed between them were full of promise and hope. "I wish I could give you more," Alexander said, running his fingers over the fine stitching of the shirt. "You deserve diamonds and silk, not just a simple shawl." "You've given me something more valuable than diamonds," Victoria said. "You've given me respect and safety and love. That's worth more than all the jewelry in the world." The new year of 1879 arrived, and with it came slow but steady signs of approaching spring. The snow began to melt, revealing green grass underneath. The days grew longer, the sun warmer. Victoria's savings grew week by week, and she began seriously planning for her future dress shop. She and Alexander talked about locations, about business plans, about all the practical details of turning a dream into reality. "There's a vacant storefront on Cortez Street in Prescott," Alexander mentioned one evening in early March. "Right size, good location, reasonable rent." I happened to mention to Mr. Crawford that we were thinking about starting a business, and he said he knows the owner. Could probably arrange a good deal if we're serious. "We should look at it," Victoria said, feeling excitement bubble up in her chest. "Maybe next time there's a trip to town for supplies." "Next week," Alexander promised. "We'll go together, look at the space, talk to the owner, see if this dream of ours can become real." The trip to Prescott the following week felt momentous. Victoria dressed in her best outfit, the blue dress she had mended and altered to fit her perfectly. Alexander wore his new shirt, the one she had made him for Christmas. They rode into town together on Alexander's horse, her arms wrapped around his waist, and Victoria felt like they were a team, partners in more than just romantic affection. The storefront on Cortez Street was perfect. Large front windows for displaying dresses, a good-sized main room that could hold fabric displays and a work area, a smaller back room for storage and private fittings. The owner, a friend of James Crawford, offered them a very reasonable rental rate with an option to buy if the business succeeded. Victoria walked through the space, her mind already arranging furniture and imagining customers, and knew this was right. "What do you think?" Alexander asked, watching her with a smile. "I think this is it," Victoria said. "This is where we start building our future." They signed the rental agreement that afternoon, paid the first month's rent with their combined savings, and walked out of the owner's office as business partners. Alexander grabbed Victoria's hand and spun her around, both of them laughing with joy and nervous excitement. "We're really doing this," Victoria said, breathless. "We're starting a business together." "We are," Alexander confirmed. "Victoria reads fine dressmaking with Alexander Osborne as silent partner and general handyman." He paused. "Although I'm hoping that name will change soon." "Maybe to Victoria Osborne's fine dressmaking." Victoria looked up at him, her heart full. Spring had arrived, and with it came the question she had been both anticipating and dreading. "Are you asking me what I think you're asking me?" Alexander went down on one knee right there on Cortez Street, not caring who might see. From his pocket he pulled a simple gold band, nothing fancy but clearly bought with care. "Victoria Reed, you are the strongest, bravest, kindest woman I have ever known. You've healed my heart in ways I didn't even know it needed healing. You've shown me what real partnership looks like, what real love feels like. I want to spend my life making you as happy as you make me. Will you marry me?" Victoria felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy this time. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Alexander Osborne, I will marry you." Alexander stood and swept her into his arms, kissing her thoroughly while passers-by smiled and offered congratulations. He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as though it had been made just for her. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I will love you and respect you and honor your choices every day for the rest of our lives. Your no will always be respected, Victoria, always. And my yes." Victoria asked with a smile. "Your yes will be cherished," Alexander promised. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with the Crawford family and all the ranch hands in attendance. Martha Crawford stood up as Victoria's matron of honor, and James Crawford gave her away since she had no father to do it. Victoria wore a dress she had sewn herself, simple white cotton with lace she had painstakingly added, and she had never felt more beautiful or more loved. Alexander looked handsome in his best suit, his eyes never leaving her face as they exchanged vows. "I promise to love and respect you all the days of my life," Alexander said when it was his turn to speak. "I promise to honor your voice and your choices, to build a life with you as partners in all things. I promise that your no will always be respected and your yes will always be cherished. This I swear before God and these witnesses." Victoria's vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to love you with courage and honesty," she said. "I promise to trust you with my heart and my future. I promise to build a life with you based on mutual respect and real partnership. You showed me what love should look like when I had forgotten it existed. I will never take that gift for granted. This I swear before God and these witnesses." The kiss that sealed their marriage was sweet and full of promise. Afterward, there was a celebration with food and music and dancing. Victoria danced with her new husband under the stars, feeling happier than she had ever thought possible. She had come so far from that terrified, injured woman stumbling through the streets of Mineral Park. She had healed, had grown, had learned to trust again. And she had found a partner who truly understood what it meant to respect and honor a woman. Their first year of marriage was busy and challenging but deeply satisfying. They worked together to establish Victoria's dress shop, with Alexander handling the business side while Victoria focused on sewing and customer relationships. Word spread quickly about the quality of her work, and soon Victoria had more customers than she could handle alone. She hired 2 assistants, young women who needed employment and whom she trained personally, passing on not just sewing skills but also the importance of independence and self-respect. Alexander continued working at the Crawford Ranch part-time, bringing in steady income while the dress shop established itself. In their spare time, he and Victoria looked at land, planning for the day when they could buy their own property. They wanted a ranch, but smaller than the Crawford spread, something they could manage together. Alexander wanted cattle, Victoria wanted a large garden and chickens, and they both wanted space for their future children to grow up safe and loved. Their first child arrived in the spring of 1880, a daughter they named Grace. She had Victoria's blonde hair and Alexander's warm eyes, and both parents fell instantly and completely in love with her. Alexander was a devoted father, helping with nighttime feedings and diaper changes without complaint, rocking Grace to sleep while singing old cowboy songs. Victoria would watch him with their daughter and feel her heart overflow with love and gratitude. "I never knew men could be like this," she told him one night as they sat together in their little house behind the dress shop, watching Grace sleep in her cradle. "Growing up, I thought fathers were distant figures who provided money but not affection, but you're so different. You're so present, so loving. Being a father is the greatest honor of my life," Alexander said quietly. "And I want Grace to grow up knowing that her voice matters, that her choices are her own, that no one has the right to hurt her or disrespect her. I want her to have the kind of father who models what good men look like, so she'll never settle for less than she deserves." "She will," Victoria assured him. "She'll grow up seeing how you treat me, how you respect my opinions and support my dreams. She'll learn what real partnership looks like." The dress shop continued to thrive, and by their second anniversary, Victoria had saved enough money to buy the building outright. Alexander had also saved diligently, and together they found their perfect piece of land, 20 acres just outside Prescott with a creek running through it and views of the mountains. They built a modest house, nothing fancy but solid and comfortable, with a large workroom for Victoria and a barn for Alexander's growing herd of cattle. Their second child, a son they named Thomas, arrived in 1882. He had Alexander's dark hair and Victoria's determined chin, and he brought even more joy to their growing family. Grace adored her little brother, helping Victoria care for him and singing him songs. The house was full of noise and laughter and love. Everything Victoria had dreamed of, but never thought she would actually have. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over their land, their children playing in the yard, Victoria turned to Alexander and said, "Do you remember that day in Mineral Park when you first saw me, when you asked if I was all right?" "I'll never forget it," Alexander said. "You looked so hurt and so brave at the same time. I knew in that moment that you were someone special, someone worth knowing. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had just walked past me, if you had decided it wasn't your business to get involved?" Victoria asked. Alexander was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "I could never have walked past you. It's not in me to ignore someone in pain, but I'll admit I had no idea that helping you that day would lead to all this." He gestured at their land, their house, their children. "I thought I was just offering assistance to someone in need. I had no idea I was meeting the love of my life." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder. "You gave me more than assistance that day. You gave me back my faith in men, in humanity, in the possibility of goodness. You showed me that my no mattered, that I deserved respect even when I was at my lowest. That gift changed my life, Alexander. It changed everything." "You changed my life too," Alexander said. "You showed me what real strength looks like. You healed from something terrible and built something beautiful. You're the most remarkable person I've ever known." Victoria Osborne. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children play, and Victoria felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. She had escaped Silas Drummond and Mineral Park, had healed from both physical and emotional wounds, had built a successful business and a loving family. She had found a partner who truly understood what respect and love meant, who kept his promises and honored her choices. Her life was not perfect, but it was good and it was hers, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. The years passed peacefully. Victoria's dress shop became one of the most successful businesses in Prescott, known for quality work and fair treatment of employees. Alexander's ranching operation grew steadily, and he gained a reputation as an honest dealer and skilled cattleman. Their family expanded with the addition of 2 more children, daughters named Rose and Lily, and their home was always full of laughter and love. Grace grew into a confident young woman who inherited her mother's business sense and her father's kindness. She went to Teachers College and returned to Prescott to open a school for girls, focusing on practical education that would allow women to support themselves. Thomas followed his father into ranching, but also developed a talent for training horses, building a successful business breeding and selling quality stock. Rose became a nurse, inspired by the care her mother showed for others, while Lily inherited Victoria's sewing talents and eventually took over the dress shop. Through it all, Victoria and Alexander's marriage remained strong. They faced challenges, of course, weathered difficult times and hard years, but they always faced them together, as partners, with honesty and respect at the core of their relationship. Alexander never raised his voice to Victoria in anger, never dismissed her opinions, never made her feel small or afraid. Victoria never doubted his love or his commitment, never worried that his respect for her was conditional or temporary. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Victoria and Alexander took a trip to the canyon country north of Prescott, camping under the stars like they had done in their courting days. Their children were all grown or nearly so, capable of managing the businesses and the ranch for a few days. It felt luxurious to have time alone together, to reconnect as a couple rather than just as parents and business partners. 20 years, Victoria marveled as they sat by their campfire, the vast Arizona sky spread above them like diamonds on velvet. It doesn't feel possible. Where did the time go? Into building something good, Alexander said. Into raising children and growing businesses and making a life together. I wouldn't change a moment of it. Not even the hard parts, Victoria asked. The lean years when the ranch almost failed. The influenza epidemic that nearly took Thomas. The fire that destroyed the first dress shop. Not even those, Alexander said firmly. Because we faced them together and we came through them stronger. That's what marriage is, Victoria. It's not just sharing the good times. It's standing beside each other through the trials and proving that your commitment is real. Victoria moved closer to him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders just like he had done countless times over the past 2 decades. Do you remember what you promised me that first day we met? She asked. About my no always being respected. I remember, Alexander said, and I've kept that promise, haven't I? Every single day, Victoria confirmed. You've shown me through 20 years and 4 children and all the challenges of building a life together that you meant every word. My no has always been respected, my yes has always been cherished, and my voice has always mattered. You've given me the greatest gift anyone ever could. You've given me the freedom to be fully myself, without fear or reservation. Alexander pulled her closer and kissed the top of her head. You've given me that same gift, you know. You've loved me not for what I could provide or what status I could offer, but just for who I am. You've been my partner in the truest sense, my equal in all things. I'm a better man because of you, Victoria. They sat together by the fire long into the night, talking about their life together, their children, their dreams for the future. They had come so far from that dusty street in Mineral Park, where a bruised seamstress and a cowboy stranger first crossed paths. They had built something beautiful out of pain and fear, had created a family and a legacy based on respect and genuine love. Years continued to pass, bringing grandchildren and new ventures, challenges and triumphs. Victoria and Alexander grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces lined with age and laughter. They eventually retired from active work, turning the ranch over to Thomas and the dress shop to Lily, content to enjoy their remaining years in peace. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and friends, a gathering that filled their home to bursting. Grace gave a speech honoring her parents, talking about the example they had set for all their children about what real love looked like, about respect and partnership and keeping promises. My father once told me, Grace said, her voice thick with emotion, that how a man treats women is the measure of his character. He showed me through his treatment of my mother that real men respect women's choices, honor their voices, and build relationships on mutual trust and affection. My mother showed me that real strength means surviving hard times and building something beautiful from the ashes. Together, they showed me what marriage should be. They are my inspiration, and I hope I can honor their example in my own life. Victoria wiped tears from her eyes as her daughter spoke, overwhelmed by the life they had built, the family they had raised, the love they had shared. She looked at Alexander beside her, his hand clasped in hers, and saw the same emotion reflected in his eyes. They had done it. They had taken the broken pieces of 2 painful pasts and built something whole and good and lasting. In their final years, Victoria and Alexander rarely left their ranch. They were content with simple pleasures now, watching sunsets from their porch, reading together in the evenings, playing with their grandchildren when family came to visit. Their bodies grew frail, but their love remained strong, as solid and reliable as it had been on that day in Mineral Park 4 decades earlier when a cowboy had stopped to help a stranger in need. Victoria passed away peacefully in her sleep on a spring morning in 1919, surrounded by family, with Alexander holding her hand. She was 63 years old and had lived a full and beautiful life, far beyond what she had imagined possible in those dark days in Mineral Park. Her last words to Alexander were simple. "Thank you for keeping your promise. My no was always respected. My yes was always cherished. I love you." Alexander lived another 2 years after Victoria's death, and family members said he was never quite the same without his beloved wife. He passed away quietly on a summer evening in 1921, sitting in the chair on the porch where he and Victoria had spent so many evenings together. His children found him there the next morning, a peaceful expression on his face, as though he had simply fallen asleep while waiting for Victoria to join him. They were buried side by side on their ranch, under a large oak tree with a view of the mountains they had both loved. The headstone bore both their names and a simple inscription: Alexander and Victoria Osborne, partners in all things, together forever. The dress shop in Prescott continued for another generation under Lily's management, before eventually closing as fashions changed and the world moved on. But the building still stood on Cortez Street, and locals still told stories about Victoria Osborne, the seamstress who had fled an abusive situation and built an empire, who had shown countless young women that they could be independent and successful while still finding love and family. The ranch remained in the Osborne family, passed down through Thomas and his descendants, a testament to what could be built through hard work and dedication. Family gatherings still happened there, and stories were still told about Alexander and Victoria, about how they met, about the promises made and kept, about the life they built together from a foundation of respect and genuine love. Their great-grandchildren would sometimes ask about the old days, and their children would tell them the story. About a woman who said no to a cruel man and paid the price with bruises and fear. About a cowboy who stopped to help a stranger and promised that her no would always be respected. About how that simple promise, that basic respect for a woman's autonomy and voice, had been the foundation for one of the great love stories of their family's history. And the children would learn, as Grace and Thomas and Rose and Lily had learned, that real love is built on respect, that real strength means surviving hard times with grace, and that promises made should be promises kept. They would learn that a person's worth is not measured by their worst moments, but by how they rise from them, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop and help a stranger in need, because you never know where that simple act of kindness might lead. The legacy of Alexander and Victoria Osborne lived on, not in grand monuments or public buildings, but in the lives they touched and the example they set. In a cowboy's promise made and kept. In a seamstress who rebuilt her life from nothing. In a love story that began with respect and grew into something beautiful and lasting. In the simple truth that sometimes the most important words you can say to another person are, "Your no will always be respected here." And that promise, made on a dusty street in Mineral Park in 1878, echoed through generations, a reminder that respect and love are not opposing forces but complementary ones, that real strength includes gentleness, and that the most powerful thing any person can do is honor another person's voice and choices, freely and completely, without reservation or condition. That was the legacy Alexander and Victoria Osborne left behind, and it was worth more than all the gold in Arizona.